Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Thank you guys so much for joining me once again. So, what if I told you that a former president of the United States, not only a former president of the United States, one of the most famous presidents of all times, that actually was president at one of the most critical junctures in our history, not only believed that giants really existed and inhabited North America and the United States, he just took it as a matter of fact and spoke of it as if it was common knowledge. And he was a big man himself in actuality. He was very tall, and he's a very curious individual, to say the least. So here we see Lincoln at Niagara Falls in the autumn of 1848. Abraham Lincoln campaigned for Whig presidential candidate Zachary Taylor in Massachusetts. On the way home to Illinois, he visited Niagara Falls and found the site so impressive that he started writing about it. And his unfinished meditation on the falls probably dates from the end of September in 1848. And here is what he wrote, and this is not debatable. This is what he wrote. It's definitive. So it calls up the indefinite past. When Columbus first sought this continent, when Christ first suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the hand of his Maker, then, as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of extinct giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed upon Niagara as ours do now. Cotemporary with the whole race of men, and older than the first man, Niagara is strong and fresh today as 10,000 years ago. The mammoth and the mastodon, now so long dead, that fragments of their monstrous bones alone testify that they ever lived, have gazed on Niagara. So very interesting, that he speaks of this species of extinct giants that fill the mounds of America, because as we know, and this is the collected works of Abraham Lincoln and the full text of an early speeches of Lincoln, so you guys could pour through if you want. I'll give you the links. I think for you guys, for most of us that have been doing this research, it's a given. It's just a given. There were giants, most definitely, and there's been a huge cover-up led by the Smithsonian. When you look at the family names behind this, you're talking about the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds, and those people that have controlled most definitely the monetary structure of this world, and also have controlled us in so many other ways. There has definitely been a concerted effort to wipe out of history everything about the giants as much as possible. And even when we look at the Bible in Genesis 6, all we're given is a tiny little fragment, a tiny, tiny little fragment. But as I've talked to you guys about so many times, if you're looking for answers, it's not in the Bible. The Bible has been edited to such a degree, and its oldest copies, the oldest copies that we have, are less than 200 BC. Most likely, possibly the oldest full copies we have of the three books of Moses are in the AD time frame. So we don't have a lot there, and you have to look elsewhere. But when we look elsewhere, we look into the Native American legends, we look into the indigenous people all around the globe, we look into other philosophies as well, we look into the books that were purposely taken out of the Bible. And as we know, Gospels-wise, we have 4 Gospels. There were hundreds of Gospels, and by some estimates, a minimum of 200 Gospels. So it's been so edited going back even into that time frame from our history. And what has happened in the recent history has been such a complete sweeping under I say sweep under the rug, but actually sweep into the bottoms of the ocean is what's happened with so many skeletons that have been unearthed. And of course, there's a lot of stuff locked up in the Vatican, inside the Vatican walls that could explain all these things, but safely guarded away from your eyes and mine. And when we talk about a subject like this, you're dissuaded from talking about it. So there's something really big about this whole subject. It's very, very important. And when we look at it, and here you see that quote again, the eyes of that species of extinct giant whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara as ours do now. And when we start looking at this, and this author right here, and this is off of GrahamHancock.com, which is fabulous. Graham Hancock has done so much work, and he's done a recent book on our hidden history here in the Americas. And it's fabulous. His stuff is so good. Highly recommend. So when we see here, in many respects, the West Virginia mounds are the key to understanding the true story of the giants who once ruled America. Not only are the West Virginia mound sites in Charleston, Wheeling, and Moundsville some of the most significant in size and number in the United States, but in 1883, the Smithsonian dispatched a team of archaeologists to the South Charleston Mound, led by Colonel Morris of the Smithsonian, to conduct an extensive dig of the 50 mounds they found there, and issued a detailed report. The report shows quite clearly that the team uncovered numerous giants, one of which was 7 foot 6 inches tall, decorated with 6 heavy copper bracelets on each wrist, and on his shoulder were 3 large plates of mica. In another mound, they found a circle of 10 skeletons surrounding another giant skeleton, as well as underground vaults, various copper and mica ornaments, religious items, pipes, and spearheads. Then at a depth of 9 feet, another giant skeleton was found in the remains of a bark coffin, and was noted in the report that this giant had a skull which was of the compressed or flathead type. And this, we are told, is just simply some sort of thing of beauty that they did, because they were trying to emulate the gods, the ones that did try to compress their skull and actually make it resemble that of the quote-unquote gods. But in reality, there are skulls that have different skeletal structures, different suture points, different plates, different placement of the foramen magnum, which that is not human. That's just not human. You can't move that. You can't move the foramen magnum where the spinal cord goes through. That is just not going to happen. So these are different beings. So as the digs progressed in other parts of the state, archaeologists in Wheeling, West Virginia, found another grouping of giants ranging in height from 6'7" to 7'6", also displaying unusual skull formations with low foreheads that slope back gradually, while the back part of the head is very prominent, much more so than the skulls of people living today. So this sounds like what we see when we look at Nefertiti and Akhenaten. Very much the same sort of, and also like the Paracas skull. Very similar. So then you have that type of skull now being found in Egypt, South America, and North America. And in Egypt, they were the royalty, and they were also the ones that were trying to bring back the worship of the one God, one singular God. So very interesting. And adjacent to these finds, an 8-mile wall and hilltop temple were also found in Marshall County on Mount Carbon. And further down the Cheat River in 1774, settlers found what they dubbed the Giant Town, with numerous gigantic skeletons, the most significant being that of an 8-foot-tall male. And so we see the white giants. Extremely ancient human remains have been found throughout New York State and New England, date back at least 9,000 BC, so 11,000 years ago. That's around the time of the last cataclysm, 11 to 12,000. In a report from the Syracuse Herald American in 1983, anthropologists from the Buffalo Museum of Science, 1,400 artifacts were dug up from a site called Phoenix Hill. in a county historical report called The History of Livingston County, New York, published in 1824, reported that in 1811, an Indian mound on Mount Morris, rude metals, pipes, and articles were uncovered in association with the remains of a giant of enormous size, the jawbone of which was so large that Adam Hostanzler placed it mask-like over his own chin and jaw, and it encompassed it. And that's not the first time that that's happened. And so when I was a kid, I used to love pulling up these type of things. I was fascinated with giants and Bigfoot. And so there are so many of these articles, countless articles. This is just a magnificently huge cover-up. 1871, that's an interesting year. Anybody else know why? I'll just put that out there. A newspaper report from Cayuga, New York, reports that 200 skeletons were removed from a collapsed mound on the banks of the Grand River. These skeletons were said to be in a perfect state of preservation, and the men were of gigantic stature, some of them measuring 9 feet, very few of them being less than 7 feet. Later, the report notes that a lost city was found on a farm in Dunville, New York, in association with 2 tons of charcoal, various implements indicating a site of an ancient forge. Further digging revealed axes, tomahawks, beads, and several smoking pipes, some engraved with dogs' heads. Giant skeletons were also unearthed, the skulls of which are of enormous size in all manner of shapes, some being twice the size of a normal human. And then, of course, you have, in addition to the ones found in New York State, there's also the famous case of the Cardiff giant, a white alabaster-like statue of an 11-foot man, which showed an exposed penis and hieroglyphic inscriptions. The statue caused worldwide sensation and was exhibited in New York City to thousands of paying customers before it was declared a fake by the New York newspapers, despite the fact that the scholars from Harvard and elsewhere insisted the statue was genuine. Okay, so who owns the New York newspapers? Who owns the media now? Who owns this media? Obviously, it's a cover-up. We're not stupid. Completely. And, it goes on and on right here. And, Ohio, I've been to several of the mounds myself as I lived in Ohio for a while. And I could tell you the vibe there is very interesting. It's very different. It kind of gives you that same sort of feeling you feel in some of the areas out here in the Southwest. And Chillicothe, I've gone there many times. And this is another site. So this is just amazing what we have found here. So many finds of giants, 8 to 10 feet tall in the Ohio area here. Related finds that are equally astonishing. Among the most significant are Cincinnati tablets inscribed with hieroglyphics, textiles that resemble those from Assyria and Babylon. Again, what really is our history here? What really is our history? It's totally hidden. We have been given a complete fake history that is not even remotely accurate. Timelines may be not even remotely accurate. So a skull examined by a surgeon in Cincinnati that exhibits evidence of brain surgery shows knowledge of practical surgery scarcely excelled at the present day, as well as evidence of metallurgy, forges, slag, iron, even saws. And so in a mound in Chillicothe, a metal perforated bird was found in addition to numerous carved pipes, one even depicting a duck riding on a fish. At the same mound site in Chillicothe, dozens of skeletons were found wearing copper masks, while at a related site in the same area, at a depth of 14 feet, a massive skeleton was found encased in copper armor. Even more astonishing, an excavation for a house in West Hickory, workers exhumed an enormous iron helmet, corroded with rust. And in another dig performed in 1889 in southern Ohio, a giant was found buried with the bones of a partner, and another with 147 bone and shell beads made from conch and perula shells imported from the Atlantic Ocean. So the history is just not even close to what we have been told. And so, did giants once live in North America? 2 brothers search for the tall truth. And I was watching an interview with by George Norrie with this gentleman here. And so very interesting stuff as well. There's so many things. There's a biblical account of David and Goliath, and there's also of when they entered the land of Canaan and they looked at the race of giants. And then, of course, God tells them to go kill them. Now, recognize, and this is my question for you guys again, let's critically think instead of just accept everything we've been told. Were these giants all evil? Yes, there are legends from Native American sources as well as other sources that talk about red-haired giants in particular being carnivorous. But are they all evil? That's the question. And so many people believe, from a biblical point of view, that what was being done was the extermination of these giants by the Israelites as the will of God. And again, I've shared my thoughts with you guys, and earlier on I was a little bit more neutral, but I don't feel like it's always in the best interest to be completely neutral, especially when I feel so strongly about some things, especially the fact that who controls this world? Who controls the knowledge that we are given in this world, and that is which is acceptable? What have they used to control our mindset? What have they given us as the matrix of which we are to think of things in, with the terminology that we are to use? What is the main dominant religions? Where do they come from? As well as political ideology. How are we controlled? Think. We are controlled through a Babylonian money matrix, for one. And we are also controlled really through the Abrahamic religions, because they dominate, with the majority of the world being of the Abrahamic tradition. So through that monetary system and through that religious lens, we are looking at the world. And as we've said, when it comes to the Abrahamic traditions, we are only given just a tiny slice of what is there in totality. And there are other sources as well that we could go to, such as the Native Americans, such as the indigenous people of other places like Africa, for instance, and Australia. And there we find, again, the same stories, the same legends. But recognize that the people that are allowing us a certain viewpoint, this is the viewpoint they want us to take. And so while many view the Sumerian cuneiform writings and all those skeptically, especially those that are of a strong biblical persuasion, I view anything that is affirmed by the powers that be extremely skeptically. Because obviously they control this system. So if they control this system, then wouldn't it make sense that the mainline religious, philosophical, and political, as well as economic systems are all their systems? Would that not make sense? How is that not obvious? And that, again, doesn't mean that there's not truth. But again, just as Constantine did, it's been used for their benefit to give us a certain matrix, to give us a certain world view and to view things in a certain way. So we must recognize that and look. There are so many legends about this. And again, see, this is quoting again the Lincoln text again. And so how big are these things? What really is our history? I mean, sure, they unearthed a ton of skeletons, maybe 7 to 9 feet tall, tons, right? But people do get that tall. We've seen that. So maybe they're just all people with pituitary problems. But then we have the problem that the plates in the head, they don't always match up. They're different. And if it's Homo sapiens sapiens, it's going to have the same plates. It's going to have the frontal, the sphenoid, the parietal, the temporal. And the foramen magnum is not going to be in a different position. The spinal cord is not going to go in a different spot. That is a different species of humanoid, most definitely. So why were they wiped out? Who wiped them out? When we look back through history, there's all different types of humanoid beings that have been here. So many so-called dead ends. What if these dead ends were, in fact, kind of genetic experiments that had outlived their usefulness and it was time for a new experiment? Just throwing that out there. And what if, we're at that point now again, and there is going to be a new humanoid coming onto the scene? Recognize that, in my point of view, the bodies are just vehicles. So, sometimes you might drive a Chevy, sometimes it might be a Honda, sometimes you might be driving a Ferrari. So, are these upgrades? Are these different types? Maybe they're downgrades. Maybe they're more manageable humanoid bodies and species so that the controllers can control easier. It's all very, very interesting. And so, again, when we go back to the biblical standpoint, maybe not all these giants were really evil. Maybe there were good and evil, just like there are with people. Everything is a shade of gray. It's not black and white. But see, when you could get people to think in black and white terms, they could do atrocious things. If they believe something is dark and evil, pure evil, then it's very easy to, quote unquote, burn the witch, or that is of Satan and must be destroyed, as opposed to recognizing and realizing that there are just a million shades of gray, and it's all from a viewpoint. So when we see this, it's really interesting, and you gotta realize and gotta think, why the cover-up? Because cover-up, that most definitely is. And I was searching through some other videos on giants, and this is one of those topics that gets demonetized and verified that it's not something that they want to put out there. So how big did they get as well? As you see here, in 1912, 18 giant skeletons reported in Wisconsin burial mounds. A 10-foot tall skeleton was excavated in Indiana. A 12-foot one in 1833 in California as well. And, there's been even reports of 36-foot long ones if we go back into some ancient times. And then if we watch mud fossil, we see that, some believe even the mountains themselves may be. And I gotta tell you, I've seen some things that would make me almost not doubt it. And, I caught in that one video I did on, and let me actually see if I look it up here. It was when we were out in the desert. Yes. Right here. When you look at the caption, let's see. Thank you guys for your patience on this. But there's one that looks just like a patella, that right there. Look at the way this is going over this. Look at the way it just is so rounded and curved. It reminds me of a knee, right? A patella. Look at the way it goes right over the socket so smoothly. Now, how big would this individual be? I'll tell you, this rock was probably, I want to say 6-7 feet high right here. So the leg, if this was a leg bone, Wow. I don't know. You're talking an individual that would be well over 100 foot tall. Well over. Could that really be? It's interesting stuff. Most definitely it's interesting stuff. Most definitely there is a ginormous cover up going on. Double rows of teeth. We find so many skeletons with double rows of teeth. This just doesn't happen. This is different. This is a different species. So, my friends, as always, like, share, subscribe. Let's get to the answers. Let's do this together. Let's find out what's going on. Share what you have found out as well. I look forward to your comments. Thank you guys so much for those that have been part of the Patreon family as well, because I recognize that at some point, there probably won't be any sort of free speech on this venue. So we look to other venues as well. And as the life is slowly being squished away from this venue, but there is hope. And several of you have put out some info that shows that there is a pushback with this, as far as accepting. We're not going to accept no free speech, but that is what's trying to be imposed on us. But for as little as $1 a month, you guys could become part of the family over on Patreon, support the channel, and get some videos that won't be up on this venue. So my friends, as always, let's keep searching, let's keep uncovering, and let's keep fighting the system and figuring out what our true history is. God bless and namaste.